Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of LinkedIn Live with Career Club. My name is Bob Goodwin. I'm the founder of Career Club. If you're not familiar with Career Club, you're welcome to check us out at career.club. We're using proven sales methods and tools to help people like you find a career that matters to you. Again, please check us out. You're also encouraged to follow us here on LinkedIn, and please do connect with me personally on LinkedIn as well. We post content all the time. We have great guests like the one we're going to have here in just a few minutes, and want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of that great content. The other thing is this is a live session. So if you've got questions or comments, please drop them in the comments section. We would love to be able to take a few questions along the way. And with that, I also want to thank my two colleagues, Heather Zinzer and Joey Pace, who help put these things together and make them as professional as they are. So thank you, Heather and Joey. So with that, I'd like to welcome today's guest, who is Mandy Rassi. Mandy is the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Michaels Stores. And so, Mandy, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for being here. Where do we find you today? Where are you sitting?
I am in Cincinnati today. So I'm in my home office. Hopefully my 3 dogs are going to be well behaved and not bark at the mailman. I am home today. I'm in Dallas about half the time, but this week I'm here.
Cool. Well, speaking of geography, we like to do a little bit of an icebreaker so people get to know you a little bit better. So where were you born and raised, Mandy?
I was born in Rockford, Illinois, a bit outside of Chicago. A lot of my family is still in Chicago, but more or less raised here in Cincinnati, actually not too far, 15 minutes or so from where I live now.
Oh, awesome. Well, you are a Midwest girl all the way then.
You got it. Exactly.
Very cool. And then where did you go to school?
I went to Miami of Ohio. So that's in Oxford, Ohio, not Miami in Florida. And did an undergrad degree in psychology and women's studies.
Interesting. Why psychology?
I think I've always just been curious about how people think, why we do what we do, and a lot of that actually fits very well with what I do now, obviously in marketing.
So we're going to pick up on that in a little bit. I suspected that was what you might say. And just a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so family, I have a husband, Craig, who works for a home builder here in Cincinnati doing land development. And then I have 3 kids. I have a daughter who just started her freshman year of high school, which is an adventure. We're like a week in. And then I have boy-girl twins who just started 5th grade. And 3 crazy dogs.
I was going to say, I think there's 3 hounds running around.
Yeah.
Too. Cool. And then people are always interested in, and this is going to be a fun part of your story, is a little bit about your career arc, how your career's developed to where you are now as a CMO at Michaels.
Sure. So kind of rapid fire. Like I said, I graduated from Miami of Ohio, and I probably thought I was going to go back to grad school, but I needed to earn some money for a while because I'd kind of put myself through school and needed to earn money. So I applied at Procter & Gamble, and somehow they hired me, even though I had never taken a business class in their consumer and market knowledge function, which for those who don't know, P&G, that's sort of the insights and analytics and consumer strategy arm, and absolutely fell in love with it. So I stayed there in a variety of roles on the brand side, and then across the North America, what they call the customer teams, the retailers, for 14 years in total. And then I moved from there to 8451, which is a data science and analytics company owned by the Kroger Co., to lead one of the analytics teams there, and started up like a marketing sort of insights and analytics function for them in the end. And then I moved to Kroger and led the brand marketing team there, and then eventually the whole marketing team there. And then I came to Michaels as the new CMO there at the end of April. That's kind of the rapid fire. So, I had a great experience here in Cincinnati with 2 of the largest employers, and now I'm learning a whole lot about Dallas with Michaels.
Well, I'm going to look forward to unpacking, some of the career story there, because I think that it's very instructional and inspirational for a lot of the folks who'll be listening to this. Real quick, lastly on the personal stuff, what do we find you doing? It sounds like you're pretty busy with kids and stuff, and dogs and Craig, but what do we find you doing when you're not at work?
Um, a lot of kid stuff for sure. My kids are involved in like ballet, gymnastics, lacrosse, golf, like all sorts of things, art. So for sure that. But then also, like we live on the bike trail here for those in Cincinnati. So I'm out riding my bike a lot, just trying to move and be active and spend some time outside, especially now. Like it feels kind of September-y here now, which is lovely. So like this is prime time when I love to be outside as much as possible.
Awesome. No, I relate to all of those things. So let's kind of move in. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some marketing stuff and then transition over into some career learnings I think that you've got that I think people will find super, super helpful. As you said, your degrees in psychology and women's studies, and then what you loved is like why people do all the crazy things that they do. 8451 clearly is a data heavy company. And so maybe you could talk for a few minutes just on your kind of the role that data and analytics has played in your career and how you think it really fits into being a modern marketer.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, marketing as an industry has evolved. Like, even if I think of when I started at P&G now over 20 years ago, the way we were going to market is completely different, right? We were still at that point talking about print ads. You would have like the TV spot that would run for some period of time, pre-e-commerce, all of that. As our industry has evolved and technology now plays a really key role, we have more data than we've ever had, but we've got to make sense of all of that and think about how we use it, in obviously privacy friendly ways, but in ways that create value for humans and then for business as an outcome of that. Really, analytics is sort of a core foundation. And I will say it served me well in two ways. One, starting my career from a consumer focused. So really spending a lot of time in homes with people, shopping with people, starting to just learn like, how do people think about the things they buy and what they do? And yeah, I mean, even I spent a lot of time in laundry, so I know way more than anyone ever needs to know about how people around the world wash their clothes. Or then I spent time at Kroger and grocery, but really just getting that foundation of being very consumer centric as the starting point for all we do. And then obviously using data to help inform priority choices, using analytics to help guide the choices where like right now my team, like we're placing a lot of bets and then we've got to see how they work and continuously optimize. So I think it serves marketers well if you, one, really have that consumer muscle and know how to use consumer insights, and cultural insights and all of that to fuel what we're doing. But then very pragmatically, you have to understand technology, data, automation, as we think about the role that personalization is playing, certainly in a lot of marketing, but especially if you are in retail or you're working in the land of loyalty programs, it is the foundation. So it has served me well. I will say at 8451, I learned much, much more about big data and loyalty data and all of that, that has served me well in my assignments since then. And we'll see, the industry will continue to evolve, right? Media continues to evolve,
Yes.
And it keeps it interesting, certainly as well.
Well, on the media side, retail media is obviously a huge thing and looks like a nice profit center, both for the retailer, but also to do very targeted marketing,
For sure.
for the brands, who are your partners, right, as a retailer. Just maybe unpacking a little bit more because I think about, marketing in the air quote olden days, maybe kind of more pre-data, very around kind of, it's more about the creative or just sort of a feeling, and that it was much more kind of gut oriented and more the Don Draper,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like I just feel like this is the thing and we're going to go with it, versus how data actually kind of rules the day. This is a little bit of an on the fly question, but can you think about a time where maybe your gut told you one thing but the data told you something else, and maybe how that informed how you made a decision?
Trying to think of a specific example, but yes, this happens all the time, especially if you work on things where you are not the core customer. I started my career at P&G on Old Spice, so I definitely was not the core customer. So you really have to try to understand, like, okay, first, how who is the customer? How will they think about this? And then let the data inform. So I will even say one where often what happens is not exactly what I would have thought or how I would have done it myself is related to like promotions and value related stuff. Both when I was at Kroger and then now at Michaels, like we're highly promotional retailers. And I've learned over time, you kind of build that gut on like, okay, will it work if we do it this way or that way? Or like, gosh, that feels like that's a whole lot of promotion that we're putting out there. Can people absorb it? Do we need to simplify this? And sometimes you do need to simplify it, but I will say in general, that is one area where I'm like, no, actually people love the buy 5, save 5, spend 25, get 5 back. That might not be how I like to engage so much as a customer. But that idea of like, you're going to score big definitely resonates.
Speaking of Dallas retailers, with JCPenney back in the day, and they brought Ron Johnson in from Apple, who was, former Target and then Apple and then to Penny, and wanted to depromotionalize them. Mm-hmm. And he ran all their customers off. Like that's what consumers liked.
They love it. Yep.
It was that whole aspect of it. And then, all of a sudden, a year or so later, he's not there anymore because that was not their customer, and maybe even not the kind of high-end Apple way of looking at life. Mm-hmm. It's a different segment and different marketplace, and you have to let the data drive you to what your customer wants, not what you think they should have or you would have if you were the customer.
Yeah, and like how and when they need to hear about it. Like one battle sometimes we fight in retail a lot is we have lots of very traditional ways that retailers have gone about their marketing, right? Whether that's paper circulars, that's billboards, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And as business leaders, we get really used to seeing those things. But the reality is like the customer might be moving on. And so it is good to go to the data and say like, okay, does this thing still have a reason to be? And sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes it's like, well, no, we're maybe actually doing that because like we like to see all those billboards that we drive by, but like, are they working as hard as they used to? Like maybe, but maybe not. And then, we should reprioritize and do something else.
Well, I know that a lot of people who will be listening to this are potentially in the vendor community, where you might be their target customer. Yeah. And you talk about, on the one side, there's the data, which is sort of the fuel, and then there's the technology, which is the engine. How do you stay current on what all the different technology options are out there? Maybe, potential third-party data, but how do you stay current on technology and help the company make thoughtful choices on which tools you should be using and why?
Yeah, two things I will say. One, I am probably a more extroverted person, so I talk to people. So often if I find like someone in my network who's working on a space that I don't know enough about or is doing something interesting, like I am not shy to just ask someone if they will do like a virtual chat or grab a coffee and just like pick their brain about it, because technology does move fast. And if you don't work in that as your full-time gig, it is harder. Like for sure, I'm not as up to date as like someone who works at 8451 today, probably. But if you're smart about your network and you have people who are in it, then you can also kind of get advice, thoughts, all of that. I also read a ton. I listen to a ton of podcasts while I'm out walking my dogs. So that is another good way that I found a few things. Like I love actually all things Kara Swisher. So that is a good place I start as like a basic. If you want to know what's going on in tech, usually Kara's talking about it. Scott Galloway is great, and they do Pivot together, which is probably one of my favorites. And I read like just a lot of stuff. So I will be on LinkedIn seeing what people are posting. I still read Ad Age after all these years because it's a good way to stay up on what's going on in the advertising industry. But it's really that spirit of always learning and just being curious, about like, if I don't understand, like last year I had a period of time where I was like, oh my goodness, I don't understand enough about NFTs and Web3. And so then I spent like months reading stuff, and agency partners are big, obviously, for marketers. So we had an agency partner who is really big in this space. So I just spent more time with them and frankly asked all the young people there, like, what are you seeing on this? Or how does that work? Can you show me how you do XYZ on your phone? And I'll say even just the young people on our teams, always are getting peppered with questions from me on, I don't know, like, I'm not very cool. I'm a mom in my 40s. So I'm like, okay, what is cool on Snapchat? Like, how does this work? Did that work? What do you guys think? And, try to stay out of their way to some extent as well, I guess.
No, that's really smart. So, I mean, one, you're obviously very intentional about learning, and you take personal responsibility for staying up to speed, not just, delegate that off to somebody. That's your job. You go figure it out. I remember a few years ago reading a book, and it was around how to use social media properly and social media data. And what they were sharing, which I think still holds true, I'd love to get your opinion on this, is you need to also know your strategy, right? And so, like, chasing the latest technology, can be a little bit of a fool's errand, because there's always something new, and you're always churning. You're hoping the technology is the answer to whatever ails you, versus this is our strategy. What does that technology do? Does that actually help accelerate, our strategy, or is that just something that's kind of cool and interesting, but off point for us?
Yeah, that is such a great point. Is like, why are we doing this? Like, actually, NFTs are a great one, right? Everyone wants to talk about NFTs, but it's like, okay, does that make sense for my consumer and where they are now, or where they're going to be in the relatively near future? Does it make sense for my brand? Or is this just something that's like good to know about because you need to be current, but there might not be an immediate application, on what we're doing? But I think that's a great filter, because otherwise you can definitely get into the shiny object thing and kind of lose your way of what you're going to do. I will say I live and breathe by OKRs. So it will be like, okay, if this is what we're trying to get done, is this another tool in the toolbox that's going to accelerate us there? Or does it live in the bucket of like innovation, maybe like place some small bets and learn? Or is it still like on the later list of like, wait and see?
But you used an acronym. Do you mind explaining that?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Objectives and key results. So just a process of declaring at the start of the year, like, what are the big objectives that we must deliver? And then you have key results that live underneath each one of those that you're sort of regularly monitoring, and then adjusting your plans to help you make progress, first in delivering those sort of nearer term KPIs that hopefully then move the overall objective of what the team has to deliver at the end of the year.
Yeah. So it helps to know where you're going if you're making progress on getting there. So absolutely. And a well-trained proctor person, that's in your DNA for sure. So when you kind of spoke about this for a second, and I'm certainly not trying to get into territory that, you or Michaels would not be comfortable in talking about, but we're talking about promotions and, being a promotionally oriented retailer in this high inflation, environment that we currently find ourselves in. How do you think about that, and how to make sure that you're still staying relevant to consumers while they're, potentially struggling to make choices?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. In some ways, the fundamentals are the same no matter what the context is, right? And what I mean by that is, first, really knowing, one, who is the customer target for you. And there's probably more than one, but it's almost like, who is your core customer? And then, is that where your growth is going to come, or do you also have a growth target? But getting first really clear on who you really need to be in service of to enable the business goals that you need. And then knowing them as well as you can, inside and out, like, what are they trying to get done? How do they think about your category? How are they making choices? But then also those broader contextual variables, which right now there are a lot of those, and they really are impacting the way people think about what they're doing. So I'll give you an example in our category, right? Inflation is a very real thing. People are trying to figure out, as you said, like, can I buy my groceries this week? Can I put gas in my car? Or can I pay my rent? Because I might not be able to do all three. The reality is arts and crafts is a discretionary category to some regard. And so we've got to understand sort of where we're fitting in that mix. And we have seen our makers, which is our core customer, start to think a little differently than during the pandemic, right? Arts and crafts went like through the roof because people were at home. It was a great way to sort of have an outlet of something to do, a way to spend your time, a way to keep your kids engaged and not bored. And now, as we're coming out of that in an inflationary context, in a world where like the world is also more open again, we need to understand how people are thinking about our category, where it fits, and sort of what are the needs and desires they have related to creativity? And then how do we need to show up in a relevant way, either to figure out, like I'll tell you, for some of our makers, they love creating. They're on really tight budgets. So that's where a lot of this promotional activity, our loyalty program where we give 3 and 6% back every single day, those are really meaningful things to someone who loves to craft, and their craft budget is really crunched right now, because that is, a space where people actually like to spend money. They love to spend their time doing this, and now they're not able to do it as much as they want. So how can we show up in a way that helps? And I think that's the key, is to make sure, especially in a world where people are thinking hard about every dollar they spend, your brand has to be offering something that is obviously relevant and obviously getting them towards what they need or what they want. Because if it isn't, it's really easy for them to just say, okay, that's not the thing I'm going to spend on right now. So the value has to be maybe even sharper than it normally needs to be, because people aren't being frivolous with where they're spending money.
No, for sure. The thing that I think is, really compelling about your categories, there's a bunch, but one that strikes me is the therapeutic quality. Mm-hmm. So if it's in the pandemic, people are massively stressed out over health issues and lifestyle changes because we're all hunkered down and nobody knows what tomorrow's going to bring, and the kids are at home and all the stuff that you were sort of talking about. But as we've transitioned, I won't say we're out of it, but at least to a new stage with the pandemic, well, now we've got all this inflation pressure, and there's a war going on, and there's a bunch of other stuff happening that create a lot of uncertainty in people's lives. And being able to just I'm kind of even envisioning it's like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket, this is cozy and warm, and I feel good when I'm in here. And for people that are makers, crafters, that's just got to be massively therapeutic. I suspect that's what you guys see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are adults who are makers, and frankly, for some of them, it is their job, right? If you're someone who's making things and selling them on the Etsy's of the world or at arts and crafts fairs, you have a lot of people for whom it is their creative outlet. It's a mental health thing for adults and also for kids. So yeah, we absolutely do see that. And I'm glad we can be an outlet for people to be able to do that.
So one of the things, if we could start to transition a little bit, I've known you for a few years now, and what we've talked about is, from a career perspective, you're still chasing your passions. You're doing what you find to be fun. And right. And you talked about you continue to learn and grow and, be an expert in, the things that you're choosing. But could you maybe start to talk to the listeners a little bit about the importance of, in your own career, of chasing your passions and how that's kind of led you to where you are now?
Yeah. So 2 things I would say. One, I'll say, at least for me personally, but I think this applies to other people. If you find something you love to do, so really think about what is the work that you like to do that doesn't feel like work. And when you can spend more of your time in that zone, the work tends to be better because it feels fun, right? It doesn't feel like work. You're not counting the hours. You're I'll say, at least for me, I know I'm in a good sort of zone when outside of work, I'm still noodling on that thing. I'm on my run in the morning thinking about okay, what are we going to do with this? Or, what if we do this? Because then you're inherently interested in it. If you also align that with really knowing where your strengths lie, that puts you in that place of flow, right? If you're working on something you like that really leverages sort of your unique superpowers, you're most likely to get into that flow sort of space where the work comes easily, the results are happening, the energy kind of feels like it's in the right zone to make progress, right? You don't feel like you're in that pushing water uphill thing. And that has served me well. I will say, if I look at the places where really my career, I think, took a meaningful step or a different trajectory, it was usually where either I took an assignment that was something I was just inherently interested in, but always was in a space that leveraged my strengths. There used to be I don't know if anyone else has ever heard this advice of you should take the spinach assignments, the things that help you round out your opportunities. I totally don't buy into that. Not zero, right? Because at best, you're going to maybe shore up an opportunity and like do okay work and probably feel like it's sort of mildly a grind all the time. Worst case scenario, you're going to feel miserable and you're going to take your career off track. So I am much more like, unless you have a major outage, like lean into your strengths, lean into what you like to do. And for me, that was like new capabilities. So even at P&G, I had the opportunity to work in new business for a period of time, which, right, I was in insights and analytics, but really the new business team was like lean and mean. So everybody was kind of doing business strategy, product development, marketing planning, which was great because then I learned a lot of skills that then have served me well. Or I went and worked on customer teams and I was not a salesperson at all. But really the unique thing then I could bring is more of like, okay, how do we think about the story around the consumer? How do we create the overall arching like joint strategy we're going to have with a retail partner at P&G? That sort of allowed me to lean into things that I was good at and that I like to do. Or like I will say one at P&G, and part of this was I've been fortunate to also have really great bosses at key moments in time who let me come with an idea of like, I see an opportunity over here for this really different thing. Like, can I go try that? And I will say one of those ended up actually going really super well. That was a side of desk project that then ended up helping to get me promoted. Even though it wasn't the core part of my job, I sort of was able to make it into something. So, I think in general, you're going to do better because you're having fun with what you're doing versus trying to grind out on something that you feel like you should do or a box you should check, but it kind of feels slightly painful all along the way.
Well, and this is probably related to what you were just talking about with the new business thing that you're working on. But I know you shared with me in previous conversations about really enjoying things that are more transformational and like new spaces. And for some people, that would feel really risky. And it's like, well, if I just stay on Tide, like Tide's not going anywhere. And so like, I'll just stay on Tide versus, trying to go explore the dry cleaning business. And is that an opportunity for us? Yeah. And how would you encourage somebody to think about within their own personal risk tolerances and things like that, but, kind of jumping off the edge a little bit and, doing something that might feel a little bit more transformational?
Yeah. Well, one, I will say I am probably not the expert to talk about this because keep in mind, I have done new business or started up new verticals or capabilities within really large, like, Fortune 20 companies at Kroger and at P&G. So the risk is always like, I'm probably on the grand scheme in the world, not on the highest level of risk. I will say I talked to everybody. So I was talking to someone on a plane actually last month who started like 10 of his own companies that have been quite successful. I said, well, what advice do you give young people? So I will pass this on. Because I was like, honestly, I don't know that at this point in my career, I would be brave enough to be like, I'm going to start from scratch and do this myself. I also like a bit being sort of the maverick in the big company, but that's just me. And his advice was actually, if you are someone who is very entrepreneurial and you want to take the jump and start your own thing, the sooner the better. Do it early in your career, early in your life, because you don't have as much to walk away from, right? It's harder, where you're sitting kind of, I'll at least say where I am in my life, because I have kids and an established career and a lifestyle that we're used to. So it feels riskier than if I would have done that at like 25, 28, 30, whatever. I will say though, within what I have done, I do love the transformation stuff. So I love taking maybe the old established, I've had the fortune to work on a lot of really long-standing brands. And I like to reimagine like, okay, how do we take the DNA of that thing that is really special and has been through time, but reimagine it in a way that's really relevant for consumers in the context today in a way that will grow the business. And I will say probably one bit of advice that I also did not understand early enough in my career. And I think this is true, actually, there's data to say this, so it's not just hypothesis. A lot of women do this, where we will look at like the next big opportunity, or like, oh, that feels messy. And like, could I really do that? And it's say there are like 10 criteria to apply for the role, and you have 8, but not 10 that were like, oh gosh, but I wish I had those last 2. I'm going to wait till I have those last 2. And I think what I realized sort of, I don't know, maybe 10 years in is like, well, no, it doesn't have to be that. Like, you have to have enough of the competencies, but you're also going to learn on the job and figure things out as you go. So, having a little bit of bravery, and frankly, like, have enough confidence in yourself to know that like you will be successful and you can figure out the new thing. And by the way, every time I start something new, and right now I'm 5 months in, so I'm in the like figuring out of something new. And one of my mentors reminded me of this when I was talking to them a couple weeks ago, where I was like, oh, it just feels like everything's not running as smoothly as I want yet. And, of course, I was at Kroger for 6 years. He was like, do you remember 6 years ago what you were saying though? Like like you say this every time you start the new thing of like, gosh, there's so much we could do. There's so much potential. Like, what are we going to do first, second, third? And you have that moment of like, okay, we're standing at like kind of the bottom or maybe the middle of the mountain and need to figure out how we're going to get to the top. And I still have moments of like, okay, are we going to get there? Like, whew, okay, this feels daunting for a moment. And then you like make the plan and you regroup and do it. But I think it's also just good to know that like that is a totally normal feeling. And by the way, if you never have that feeling, you're probably not growing enough. But it's a very human thing to feel like maybe I don't know 100% of what I need to do this job well. And like, that's okay. If you've got like 70+%, you're probably in a great position actually, because it means you're going to learn something new.
Well, and because this is Career Club, we talked to a lot of HR experts.
Okay.
And one was Professor Joe Fuller from Harvard Business School. And he talks about that the KPIs for talent acquisition, where you've got, hey, I want you to tick all 10 boxes here. They end up just finding people that have already done that same. That's what they're doing today is the job. And what they don't bring is a fresh perspective and kind of that, why wouldn't we try it like this? It's like, because there's almost, I'm going to say this wrong, but kind of a naivete that you're like, well, why couldn't we do it this way? And it brings some creativity and innovation. Somebody's like, oh, I'm just going to take the same playbook that I already know and just drop it on your thing. And they're not growing as a person, and the space isn't growing because they're just doing the same thing that was already being done. So I really agree with you on that. I want to just, sorry, this is going to be like a couple side detours here real quick. Clark wants to know insights and analytics, and those do get lumped together at a lot of companies. Clark's a data scientist, and he even finds these terms confusing. Any clarity you would offer on insights and analytics?
As much as I can, I agree with you, Clark. And I think things do get conflated. So when I say it, I'm really speaking in the context probably of how it was set up at P&G, which is a lot about making connections across research and data points. At the time when I was there, this may be very different today. We were using a lot of external partners, and our job was really to be the strategist to distill all of that, not fielding the research ourselves in most cases, especially quantitatively, not building the machine learning models, although I think they are doing more of that now at P&G, versus, I'll say then when I went to 8451, which is a data science company, that is a very different ballgame, right? That is literally like, we have hundreds of millions and trillions probably of data points, and we're applying machine learning, and different models to, yes, extract insight, but also frankly, just act on the data itself without even pausing at the insight step in some cases, which we do that in marketing a lot, right? If you think of like an email that's going to tee up a relevant promotion for you or something, we don't need an insight step. We just need the data to programmatically fuel it. But I agree. I think they do all sort of get lumped together. And I think insight is pulling the learning out with an implication of like, here is what that will mean and an idea of what we should do on the business about it. Analytics is obviously the process of analyzing the data. And then I think data science is a practice that is obviously more vast and has lots of different career paths within it.
Yeah, if I could just echo that a little bit, for me, it's, and you just said this, so I'm repeating you now, is the what, so what, now what? The analytics can have a lot of what. And did you know that men, 53 to 47 prefer this? Okay, that's what the data says. That's what the analysis says. So what? Should we even care about that? And to the extent we should care about it, what should we do about it? And that's the insights piece of it. And we keep referencing Proctor, but they at least used to talk a lot about human insights. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, these are real people. And so how do we actually find the human insight in all of that so that we can make a strategic decision that creates competitive advantage? So it's a great question, Clark. Thank you. And then again, I always want to be very cognizant of not asking you anything that you're not comfortable, either from your tenure or just what would be trade secrets, essentially. But kind of broadly, just thinking about vendors and what they're bringing to you from a marketing technology perspective, or are you dragging them up a hill saying, "Hey, we're trying to do this. You guys need to keep up with what we're trying to do"? Do you guys feel like do you feel like you're kind of evenly yoked, or do vendors, or you guys tend to feel like you're ahead of the other from a tech perspective?
So I think this varies widely company to company, I will say. And I've only been at Michaels 5 months, so I will make a broad comment more than a Michaels specific comment. I think in general, the vendor community will be ahead of most client side, because if I look at like any of the last 3 or 4 teams that I've led, we aren't living and breathing any one vertical, and technology moves fast. So if, for example, I'm looking for dynamic creative optimization, and there's a whole suite of MarTech tools that can do that. The reality was I had a few people, I'll just say on my team at Kroger as an example, who worked in the MarTech space. We then partnered with a company where that was like one of the only things they did. So of course they are going to know it better and be more up to date. Or I think about the media space is a great one where I have relied very, very closely on our media agency partners, because the algorithms move really, really fast. It is a really vast network of what is out there. So like, even if I could keep up with, let's say, all the changes in Google that are constantly happening, that's great, but that's only Google. And then you have all the meta platforms, and you have Snap, and you have the whole like CTV. And the reality is, on the client side, because we are running the business, we are not staffed deep enough most of the time to know all of the technical expertise. So we do, at least I'll say at the companies that I've worked at, more brand and retail, we absolutely rely. Where I think we help our vendor partners, and actually where the partnership works the best, is when we can see a business opportunity or a simplification or something. See, here's one of the dogs.
I love that. I think it's awesome. This is the humanization. I love it.
That's where then we can create new solutions together. If they can understand, okay, on the technology side, this is what we might be able to do. We can say, well, on the business side, I really need a tool that could let me do this, or that could reduce the time to get from here to there. And then that's where real innovation can happen. And it's often like we can bring the practical application side or sort of the business brief for what we need. But by and large, I would say I have relied a lot on the vendor community to actually figure out how to solve those problems, but certainly to advance the technology, right? Because we're like, neither of the companies that I work at are, if I think of Kroger or Michaels, but even P&G, like these aren't tech companies, right? They're brands, they're retailers who have a lot of technology, but not in the same way, a Google, a Microsoft, a lot of the smaller MarTech vendors are going to be.
Sure. No, that's super helpful. I want to be mindful of the time, and I know this is a really important topic for you, which is the role of mentors. And kind of thinking of from two sides. So I'll ask two questions in one, and you can play with it. One is the role of mentors for you as you have progressed in your career, and how you've relied on people to help provide guidance to you. And then as you kind of have made it to the C-suite, how mentoring others has become part of what you do. So whether you're the mentor or the mentee.
Yeah. And both are related. And actually, sometimes you're both in the same relationship. So the role of mentors for me, I mean, I could not overstate how really super important mentors, and also like great bosses and peers that I've worked with and people on my team. Like I think of, if there's anything good about me as a leader, um, I think about it almost of like, if you could see the Lego blocks of me as a leader, each block would have a skill and a person associated with it. And like, I could fill up your ear of like, okay, for like strategic thinking, these two people, like clear communication. Oh my gosh, Monica Turner at P&G, principle-based leadership, Jessica Whitehall, like each one for me, great coaching, Judy Capitas. Like I can think of all the things where someone spent the time to teach me something. And then I have sort of collected those skills and maybe put them together in my own way of sort of what my leadership style is and relevant to the work that I'm actually doing. But I am fortunate to have really worked with some amazing leaders who also cared a lot about developing other people. Yeah. And I think that goes a long way. I am forever grateful. I mean, I literally joined P&G. I had not taken one business class. So I am grateful to like the very first ever finance business partner I had, who had to explain a lot of really pretty basic things to me and did it in the most patient and very helpful way. So I really cannot maybe overstate that. But even then, when I moved to like when I made the jump more from the analytics side into brand marketing, people I didn't even know were like a mentor of mine then connected me with other folks who had been CMOs or had transformed brands in other places. And I can't even tell you how many people, like very senior people who really did not need to spend any time with me, spent an hour on the phone. Steve Fund, who's the former CMO, hopefully it's okay, I'm calling people out, former CMO of Intel, literally spent an entire afternoon with me when I was out in California and like walked me through the transformation journey they had done to like give me advice of like, okay, if I were in your shoes, these are the things I would think about as I was like first time ever leading a brand marketing team, trying to reinvent a 100-year-old brand. And so I have been very, very lucky for the people who've been willing to coach and teach and support me. And some of it sometimes is technical skill. Some of it was like after I had my first daughter and I was trying to figure out how to like work and have a great career, but like really just wanting to be with this little human like 24 hours a day. And, you know, I had some folks who kind of helped me through that with some really good advice. You know, and sometimes it's people who work on your team. And that is often, I will say, if I think of the last 5 years, very, very often where I have learned the most is people who worked on my team who were brave enough to say like, yeah, the way you're doing that, not helping us, or like, that I could ask a million questions, right? Like on some of the technical stuff in particular, like, oh my gosh, the head of the media team at Kroger, a woman named Kay, who is amazing. The questions that she would get on some of the like programmatic, like, okay, but how do we wire it to do this? And like, how would you think about that? You just learn a ton. And so I think sometimes the two-way mentorship really also helps. And I love doing it because honestly, I am so, so incredibly grateful to all the people who did that for me. And I think that is part of our responsibility as we grow in our careers and as we grow as leaders is to help other people get there as well. You know, whether they're people on your team, which obviously then benefits the team and the work, or just like someone who reaches out to you that you're willing to have coffee with it and have a chat. And usually, by the way, you feel really good after those. At least I do. Like even like I've done a few over the summer with like college students who are home and thinking about careers in marketing. And it's like the most fun hour I spend in the day because their energy is great. And sometimes it's also helpful to reflect on like, oh yeah, how did I do that? I haven't actually thought about breaking that down before. And it clarifies your thinking too.
Well, maybe a couple little lightning round questions just to, again, kind of keeping a little bit of an eye on the clock. When you think about the attributes or soft skills that you look for, so you're building out a team, you know, maybe you're interviewing somebody or looking at promoting somebody, what do you look for? What are the soft skills?
Yeah, soft skills, curiosity is a big, big one because if someone is curious, they're going to continuously learn. And in marketing, things are always changing. So continuously learning is super critical. Clear communication. I think written communication, being able to sort of dialogue through things, that part of that might be because we're in marketing and sort of the nature of the work we do, but that is a really big one. And frankly, the energy that people bring. And it depends on what the role is. Obviously, some roles are more individual contributors, some are more leading a team, but generally speaking, like, are you someone my team's going to be excited to work with every day? Like, are you going to be able to inspire and motivate others? Are you like bringing good juju to this party? Especially like a lot of the roles I've had have been more like transformation or, trying to reimagine something. And you need people with a lot of energy and frankly, the resilience to do things like that, because you can have moments where it's going to feel really hard and you're going to run into the brick wall every so often. And you need people who are like, okay, we're going to pick ourselves up and like go again. So those would probably be some of them. The other one I would say, which is probably more leadership advice, is also knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. So I will say, well, I love the like, think about what might be and how might we transform this. I am not an operations person. So in every role now, one of the first things I try to figure out is like, who is my operational person where I can say like, this is where I want to go in 3 years. We're going to do this and this and this and that. And they are going to help me be like, okay, but like looking around the 5 corners here, these are the things you need to think about. These are the steps to help to break it down. So I'm also usually thinking, especially forming leadership teams, is how are we having complementary strengths as well so that we kind of amplify the whole.
Which goes back to your point about like, don't spend too much time trying to shore up your air quote weaknesses. How do I build a team around me so that as a body, we're as cohesive as we can be? I think this is important, and I don't want to skip over this one. There's organizations like Chief that are out there helping, women who are in C-suite roles or aspire to C-suite roles. What advice or encouragement would you give, particularly to women who aspire to get into the seat that you now occupy as a CMO at a major company?
Well, so I think there's like general leadership advice I would give anyone. So like on one hand, I love the question. On the other hand, I'm like, it would be great if women could just have the same advice everyone else would have, and that
that's a very fair point.
Questions that men would be asked. What I will say though, specific, and there's data to back this up, a few things. One, like I said, curiosity, asking the questions, I would say that is for everybody. I will say one thing that was true of me, still is true of me as a female leader, and data would say, in fact, I was on a Chief webinar about this about a month ago, is confidence, right? It is that whole, like, if there are 8 qualifications or 10 qualifications and I have 8, like, ooh, am I ready? Should I go for it? Really having the confidence, because I think very often as women, if we rack and stack our skills versus others, we rate ourselves worse than where we actually are. So just having the confidence in your ability, that like you are the expert in that thing, or you are the best person for that job, like take the chance and go for it. I will say an old boss of mine, there was a training a long, long time ago at P&G when you got promoted to a certain level, and kind of where it kicks off is like, of all of you who are here, X very small percent of you will get to like the big executive thing. And I said, yeah, I couldn't believe it. Then I'm looking around at all these amazing people in the room. And I'm like, well, gosh, there's no way I'm going to get there, because like this person is brilliant and this person has done all of this. My male boss at the time was like, well, so like, what was your reaction? He was like, I feel sorry for all the other people in this room. And he was being a little bit flippant. And also he was a very confident person. But I do think there is a nugget of truth sort of in that too often women don't just go for it, and sort of give it a shot and be brave a little bit, because I think sometimes we are so collaborative and so seeing the best in everybody else that it causes us to like downplay ourselves. The Chief webinar, if anyone is a chief and has access to that, was all around. It was called like imposter syndrome. It was fantastic. So I highly recommend it. But it was exactly to this, that they'd interviewed all of these senior women in all fields. So it was like scientists who were leading their field. And even they would say like, well, I'll give you my opinion, but the real expert is this person over there. And it's like, well, no, you are actually proven by all the research you've done, the expert. So that would probably be it. I'm thinking if there's anything others that I would say, not just for women, but in general, is like surround yourself with great people and learn anything and everything you can from them. Don't be shy to ask questions. Try to extract whatever knowledge you can. And frankly, sometimes that is you're surrounded with great people. Sometimes, like, we've all had bosses who aren't the best, and you learn something from that too, but just be intentional about extracting the learning and then applying it.
Yeah. So, first of all, I appreciate your comment. Like, I wish I didn't have to contextualize this to women. Like, could we just make that go away?
Yes. And that was not directed at you, by the way. I mean, that is just
no. And I'll take it personally, but also agree with it. But I think that the complementary statistic to that 80 women want to check 8 boxes, men only want to check 6. Like, I'll figure the rest of it out. I think that's the statistic. Yeah. Is it men are like, no, if I get 60% of it, that's close enough. I'll go give it a whirl.
Yeah.
And, women are like, well, every point you just made. So I'm hearing a lot about curiosity, confidence, mentors. What have we, by the way, one of the things that I really noticed about you is vulnerability and like being very willing to say, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
And like to go seek the answer. But, whether it's, somebody who's the CMO at Intel or some younger person on your team that knows more about TikTok than you do, like, you're very comfortable saying, I don't know, which I think is a superpower by itself.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Yes, that is very true, because the world is big and there's a lot I don't know. And I think that's the danger zone you get into, is thinking that especially I think the further you get in your career, you may have known. And then like, you don't know. Like, one joke I always had with the last analytics team I led, I was like, man, if this was in Excel, I got it. Unfortunately, they were all coding in like Python and I forget the other one they were using, which like zero. I don't even know how to open the program at that point in my career. Right. So it's also like knowing what you knew and maybe you still know it, but then also always being curious to learn the next thing, because the world moves fast. And I will say, for me, at least, one of my greatest fears is like, I never want to be irrelevant. So yeah, I'm going to ask the gajillion questions about TikTok because it is important to my consumer. It is actually, in my category, a really relevant place to show up. So I have to figure out how to be a practitioner of it, whether that's what I might do in my own personal life or not. Like, it is table stakes. You got to figure it out.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yes, correct.
We've talked about, is there anything that we haven't shared, Mandy, that I want to make sure that we squeeze every last drop of wisdom and insight that you've got for this call? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you're hoping that we might touch on?
The only thing I would say to underpin some of this, that I don't know if someone told me this or not, like, it does take work to advance your career, and it takes work from you. Doing the networking stuff, carving out time to make sure you're learning something new each week. Looking at, if you're looking for another job, like carving out the time to speak to recruiters, to look on the career sites and see what's out there, and really think about your brief of like, what is the work that I want to do? What level do I want to be at? Why is that? I will say, too often I will have folks come to me who want career advice, but then when I'll say, okay, well, where do you want to go? It's like, well, I don't know where I want to go. I'm like, okay, but that's like asking me to give you a map, but you can't tell me if you're going to New York or San Francisco. So it's hard for me to tell you what the steps are because I don't know where you want to go, which sounds obvious, but honestly, I think it does take time and effort and a real unpacking and thinking about your own goals and objectives. But then frankly, like building a network, as you know, it takes effort. And especially, I am a bit more introverted. Technically, I'm right in the middle of the spectrum. I also have a very introverted daughter for whom this would be like her worst nightmare. So I get it that that's not the way everybody wants to do it. But the beauty of LinkedIn and, some of the online stuff is you can build connections in different ways. That doesn't mean you have to have like coffee with 100 people. But I will say too often too, we expect like our companies are going to like hand us the career path. And right. The reality is you don't want the off the shelf career path. Like you want the career path that is best for you, which might mean you have to architect it. But again, then you've really got to take some ownership. And yes, your company a great company will help you get there. They will provide opportunities for you to make the most of. They will provide training that you can take advantage of. But ultimately, I think having that sense of ownership and frankly, putting in the work, because it is work. It's not just going to magically manifest on its own. And I will say for me, probably when I was like a young one just beginning, I probably thought like Procter & Gamble will give me all the steps and I will just check these boxes and like off we will go. And while P&G does have very clear career pathing, so it was true to an extent, clearly it didn't get me to where I am now, right? I made choices along the way and had to think about hard decisions at different points, really unpacking like what made the most sense for me at that point in time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So you're making me think of so many things, but the map analogy is awesome. And you're right. So many people ask for career advice. They say, well, where do you want to go? I don't know. Well, I don't know how to draw you a map to where I don't know, because I don't know where I don't know is. It's interesting. The off-the-shelf career path is very interesting. That almost reminds me of like being an Eagle Scout. Well, I got to get on my merit badges, and by the time I'm done, I've got this. And it's like, it is so not linear. By the way, your off-the-shelf career path may include you don't work here anymore, because we've had to, make a personnel decision. Yeah. And unfortunately, you got caught up in that. And if you don't have a network to draw on, that's like going to the ATM, like asking for $20 bills, but you never made any deposits. Yeah. There's nothing going to come out of that network machine. So I think that's really, really important. So I appreciate last thing on the working bit. This is a Bobism. Wanting without working is wishing. Right. And it's like, you've got to you read all your books and you're doing your podcasts and you talk to a bazillion people and you are doing the work to learn and to become what you want to be. And waiting for somebody and being passive is not a plan, because that's never going to work. So I think that, that you're very illustrative of someone who's taken control of her career, been very open to a nonlinear path, which I think is going to be much more reflective of the future than of the past, back to the off-the-shelf career path. I think it's going to get very, kind of like a spider web, and it can break in a bunch of different directions, and you need to be open to how it breaks. But I think what you shared today, Mandy, has been so helpful. I know for me, I learned a few things along the way that I thought I already knew, so thank you. I know, and I can see from the feedback that people have really enjoyed what you've had to share. And hey, Charlie, thank you. I think it was a great session, Mandy.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, she's so sweet. So if people want to get in touch with you, Mandy, what's the best way to do that?
Honestly, LinkedIn is great. Send me a message. I will try to respond. I get a lot, as probably most people in roles like mine, I get a lot of sales pitches. So sometimes it takes me a minute to filter through, but certainly hit me up on LinkedIn. That's awesome. A great place to start.
Well, this again was great. I mean, we learned a lot about marketing. We learned a lot about career pathing. We learned a lot about soft skills that I think people can take away. So I'm very appreciative of your time. You've got a big job, and to spend a few minutes with us today is great. I know the audience, again, we can just watch people respond positively. So thank you for that. And to everyone who took the time to watch us today or to listen to this later as a podcast, thank you. And you can see other great episodes or listen to other great episodes like this on your favorite podcast platform, Career Club LinkedIn Live with Bob Goodwin. So again, Mandy, thank you so much, and hope you enjoyed the rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.